Pride is about people we are proud of and who we admire. Pride is the reason to hit the road and make new friends. Pride is about people from Kazakhstan who have succeeded in the world. Today, I'm inviting you to the research laboratory of Shoukhrat Mitalipov, a scientist who was born near Taldykorgan. We have been planning the meeting with prominent scientists for a long time. Negotiations lasted for almost a year, and finally, things worked out. The Oregon Health and Science University gave the permission to shoot, and the doctor found time for us, and here we are in Portland, Oregon, where everything seems to be about scientific and medical research. It is amazing that literally on the eve of our meeting, the world-famous Time magazine has included Shoukhrat Mitalipov in the list of the 50 most influential people in the field of healthcare. Shoukhrat Mitalipov was born on August 19, 1961 in Avat town of Almaty region. He has studied in Moscow Timiryazev Agricultural Academy and Center for Medical Genetics of Russian Academy of Medical Sciences. He defended his doctoral dissertation at the Institute of Molecular Genetics of the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences. He has been living and working in the United States since 1995. In 1998, he began his research work at Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, after conducting doctoral research in stem cells and developmental biology at the University of Utah. At the moment, Dr. Mitalipov heads the OHSU Center for Embryonic Cell and Gene Therapy, which is focused on developing methods to prevent the transmission of genetic diseases from parents to child. Also, Shoukhrat Mitalipov is a professor at the National Primate Research Center of Oregon, Department of Medical Bioengineering, Department of Acuity and Gynecology, Department of Pediatrics, Knight Cardiovascular Institute, and the OHSU School of Medicine. It is not easy to explain in few words the work of Dr. Mitalipov, though the work in this lab cannot be called just theoretical. One of the first people whom we met at the Research Institute is a colleague of Shoukhrat, charming Amy Koski. As a manager, she connects scientists and those who are interested in their work.
I've worked with Shoukhrat for about 5 years. He hired me to be the clinical connection between science and the patients that we recruit for IVF material.
Certainly, we wanted to talk to everyone who works with Mitalipov.
Shoukhrat Mitalipov, the most humble, kindest man who works so hard, and we all work very hard with him. Yeah, we're on call 24/7. Lots of work happens around here, but in the end of the day, he's a pleasure to work for.
Amy even remembers a funny story about him.
Yeah. So we all went, there was about 5 or 6 of us who went to Cologne, Germany last summer, 2 summers ago, for our conference, Euromit. And I learned how much he loves blues music. And so we were at a big gala and everybody was having a good time at the end of the conference, and he's dancing to blues music with all of our fellow workers in the lab, and it was so great to see. We don't have a chance to dance around here.
There is always a place for jokes, even in a place where people have such serious work.
Oh, it's made for stress reduction. Because we get so tired and we work with our hands so much, so I have all the toys. And this is my favorite. So when I'm consenting patients, you can see the sperm and the egg. It's not wanting to go. The sperm and it changes colors. Let's see.
Cute little things help patients to get the right emotional attitude.
There's our girl, and then there's the flashing one in here somewhere. Oh, it doesn't want to flash. For the parent, there we go. For the parents who just don't want to know.
The majority of Mitalipov's colleagues are women. He has been working side by side with Paula Amato for 10 years. Now they're researching the techniques and possibilities that he has discovered earlier while working with primates.
So the main application of this research, we think, will be to prevent transmission of genetic diseases from parents to their children. That's the major application. But we also think that the things we're learning through this research might have applications in other areas of medicine, perhaps cancer prevention or treatment, aging prevention, and so there may be other things that we learn from this research that will be applicable to other areas of medicine, including perhaps using this technology to improve pregnancy rates with in vitro fertilization. So even though we're focused on preventing the genetic diseases right now, we think these techniques have actually broader applications. Well, we're very humbled by the power of the technology. Obviously, we feel very privileged to be able to work with someone like Shoukhrat because he's a world-class scientist. He's very creative and very intelligent. We all feel very lucky to be associated with his laboratory. And we're also very appreciative of OHSU, our institution that provides support for this research, which can't be done almost nowhere else in the world. So we feel very lucky, but we're also very humbled because we know the technology is very powerful, and in the wrong hands, it could potentially be misused. So we're very careful, and we're trying to consider all the ethical issues and safety considerations as well.
By the time Dr. Mitalipov has come, we had already managed to get a little comfortable here, talk with the colleagues, and even see how things work. However, we're still very interested to talk to Dr. Shoukhrat about everything that is happening here. Guys are making everything. I mainly represent them. Therefore, so to speak, I represent the work of a large group of people. I have about 10-15 people here in the laboratory. Then, there are several laboratories that are also part of our center, and we also have an IVF clinic, where most of the doctors work. They work, of course, with patients, but they also have research projects. Well, if we talk about your work, can you tell what the main thing is? What is the essence of what you are doing? Could you explain that to a person who is not from the science world? It is pretty hard to explain right away. Well, the point is probably that we're studying the earliest development of a man when we are starting to develop even before implantation, that is, when the sperm fertilize the egg. And after 5 days, the zygote develops, and we mainly study these 5 days in human development. Perhaps the most important thing in this room is this artificial uterus. It contains the cells in their first 5 days. Everything here is under control. Temperature, noise, light, and every half-hour system takes a picture, allowing to track the development as closely as possible. That is, we know how children are born, how they grow, but as an early embryo, we usually do not see them because they're inside mom. Well, we learned how to extract them, and this development takes place in these incubators for 5 days. Then we need to transplant them back to mom. And why do we do this? Because there are many forms of infertility when the families cannot have children. And so they come to our laboratory, clinic, where we help a woman to develop her egg. That is, we have a system of hormones, and then we make a retrieval. Retrieval. Yes, we retrieve the eggs directly from the ovaries, and this fertilization, the first development of 5 days, happens here in the laboratory. In the 21st century, the problem of infertility has become one of the main problems for people in all countries of the world. This method is not permitted everywhere. In many states, for example, such studies and applications of this method are not approved, but progress cannot be stopped. As a method of cell therapy, probably IVF is one of the most advanced compared to several others, like blood transfusion or bone marrow transplantation. That is also cell therapy. Well, those are well-known methods that work for the treatment of certain diseases, and IVF is such a very separate method of cell therapy, which was developed about 40 years ago. But of course, there has been a lot of progress over the years. We do many things that we didn't know how to do before. Let's say we artificially fertilize an egg. If the sperm cannot fertilize an egg, we help with the sperm injection. This procedure is simply called ICSI. We just take a small pipette and inject one sperm inside the egg. This procedure was invented 20 to 25 years ago, but right now it is already widely used. Colleagues characterized Dr. Mitalipov as a modest person, and although in any great undertaking the merits of the whole team should be taken into account, he was the one called one of the most significant people in the world in healthcare by the Time magazine. The personal contribution is probably big just because we managed to create this center and get around all these restrictions. Because in Oregon it's different. Let's say in 49 states, the research that we're doing isn't allowed. In Oregon, allows it. Is that why you're here? Yes, that's why we're here, and my colleagues are here because we want to work and study human embryos, and it is allowed here. Of course, it is very strictly controlled, that is, each experiment goes through various committees and is discussed, and we need permission before we can start working. And therefore, of course, it turns out that very few laboratories do what we do, and we try to contribute as much as possible, since very few people work in this area. The work of a scientist, perhaps in some ways, is like creative. The answer to a question he has been thinking for a long time can come suddenly. Yes, it can happen, especially if we work with some problems today. We constantly think, we constantly look there on the data and decide what to do. And many such big projects come gradually. Apparently, somehow you grow into them. I took part in many conferences, discussed things with clinicians and scientists, and somehow we came to the conclusion that there is such an opportunity to start such a project to study something. In August 2017, Mitalipov and his colleagues published groundbreaking studies that clearly demonstrated that the CRISPR genes can be effectively used to correct a mutation in the human embryo and prevent the transmission of the disease to future generations. This is the first time that scientists have successfully tested a similar method of confronting genetic diseases. The results of this remarkable study were confirmed in 2018 and were presented in thousands of publications around the world. We have been thinking for a long time to start gene therapy on the basis of IVF. That is, IVF is basically cell therapy, and this therapy is used only for the treatment of infertility. Well, it seems to be such a big problem for humans. Infertility is a disease, but we wanted to use IVF for genetic diseases, and genetic diseases mostly develop in early embryos, or when they are gametes. They are usually hereditary diseases. That is, it is impossible to use IVF to prevent the transmission of mutations through embryos, through gametes. Such an idea has existed for a long time, probably 40 to 50 years ago, when we first learned to manipulate DNA, when we began to create synthetic DNA. And then there were mostly fears that we would learn or someone would make genetically modified children through such DNA. Well, right now, all this leads to the fact that we do not need to make modified children, but basically we need to rotate the modified mutant genes so that they become normal, that is, to modify them. And there's already the result of this work? Yes, already. The main and scientific part of our center is the development of these future technologies. Of course, the introduction is quite problematic because of ethics, basically, not because we haven't scientifically developed it, or it is inefficient or unsafe. Mostly because of ethics, and that is why it has taken place with such difficulties. But some clinics already use our developments. And I had such a very special interest in the mitochondrial genome all the time, and the idea was how to help these families, well, women, to have healthy children, so that they would have their own children without these mutations. And we have developed this technology, mitochondrial replacement therapy, but media called it a child with 3 parents. And when we first developed this technology, media immediately called it 3-parent babies. It basically remained, and many people call it so. Well, basically, the majority of the population know it under that name. In fact, it was the first method of gene therapy of hereditary diseases, and already such children were born in many countries. How old is the first baby now? I think 3 years. That was 3 years ago. That is, the result of the work is still being researched. Yes, children are born. In any case, that clinic, which is allowed to do this, they study the babies, while England is officially making clinical trials. There, the state finances it, and this is generally fairly well controlled. But there are countries, territories, where it is not particularly controlled, and it seems that the clinics are making it on their own. Well, we constantly work there with these clinics, asking them to monitor the children, because it is still a kind of experimental technique. You're talking about media, and what about the church? Doesn't it criticize you? And the church has always been against the IVF in general, from the very beginning. It does not recognize IVF at all, does not support it. Of course, when we add some more genetic methods of treatment on the basis of IVF, it is unlikely that they are delighted. Therefore, here are mainly prohibitions or difficulties with the introduction in the clinic, especially here in the US or Europe. It mainly has this religious basis. But as you know, in the US, for example, there is a very big politics about abortions. They want to ban abortion. But this IVF is also considered one of the forms of such abortions, because we create embryos and making things that people are not supposed to do. A day spent in the laboratory, for me, has become sort of a visit to the secret workshop of wizards. And everything happens right here? Yes. Here we are doing all these manipulations. It's called microsurgery. Here we make transplantations. Here we initiate some gene constructions and work on them. We now have such a system of micro-manipulators, which basically allow us to transmit the movement of the hand. When we move the hand, we cannot calculate with microns, we use centimeters. And there it is necessary to move everything with microns. And this is a joystick that allows us to reduce the movement of our hands by 1,000 times. It can be changed, and here, on the tip, there is a pipette. Therefore, everything seems like we're moving our hands, but the movement is very small. People here work to save someone's health and life, or to help become parents, and this work never stops.
науку я пришел только потому, что
I became a scientist because it is such an interesting area where everything is not identified
нет ответов, одни вопросы.
and there are no answers, only questions. And it seems that science was created to find the answers to these questions.
Всегда интересно там создавать эксперименты.
And it was always interesting for me to create experiments, and when you get the result, you get new knowledge. We did not know about it.
Мы не знали об этом. То есть всегда интересно.
That is always interesting. So science seems to be a very interesting profession, although it seems to be so rather restless. We make a discovery, let's say we work 3-4 years, we create some new methods.
Работаем 3-4 года и там создаем какие-то новые методы, там приборы
We need
нужны.
instruments there. Then it means we have discovered something. It seems like we just completed the project, we start something else. And as a rule, this new project will take us to some other area.
Все меняем и уже там
We're changing everything, and we will have to learn some new areas. In science, you constantly need to learn, constantly read, and constantly keep yourself under stress.
и вроде бы постоянно
And not only us, everyone. Therefore, science is a scrupulous thing, but probably that is the interesting thing about it.
вещь. Но этим, наверное, интересно, что вот, ну,
You will never get bored because we do not do the same things every day. Every day, we create some new issues.
новые проблемы себе создаем.
In Portland, where our meeting took place, it seems that everything is somehow connected with OHSU. Even one of the main attractions of the city, aerial tram, which offers a stunning view of the city and connects two main buildings. It's nice to walk here, especially since we got lucky with the weather. October was sunny.
Просто давайте начнем с того, что
How did you move to America and when?
когда это было.
Это было в 95 году.
It was 1995 after I got my research degree, and usually you have to go through another 3-4 years of postdoctoral training.
Проходить еще 3-4 года, это postdoctoral training называется. Ну и нашел позицию.
Well, I found a position. Basically, that was a fellowship.
В смысле, у меня была такая стипендия.
Well, I had this type of scholarship for a year. I came to Utah State University. They mainly deal with the reproduction of livestock.
Там занимается в основном воспроизводством у животных, ну, сельскохозяйственных. Но там они как раз была большая группа, которая занималась.
Well, there was a big group that was engaged in cloning. Cloning basically was done on cattle or sheep.
Поэтому вот меня интересовало клонирование,
And so I was interested in cloning.
такое воспроизводство. И мы искали такие лаборатории.
And we were looking for laboratories with an expertise.
В Москве я занимался в основном мышами, а
In Moscow, I was mainly working with mice
биология клонирования.
and decided to take up the biology of cloning. So I came here and stayed.
Поначалу ведь, получается,
Well, you had sort of a new work field,
ну, не
but you still needed to get used to a new country, everyday life. It was probably hard at first.
наверное, нелегко поначалу было.
Да, ну, привыкаем. Конечно,
Yes, but I got used to it. Of course, when I came, I was a student because of a scholarship.
стипендии, потом, значит, ну, в научной
And in a scientific career, it is usually necessary to grow. And my next position was here in Oregon.
я приехал как типа научный сотрудник. И потом уже
I arrived as a research assistant, and then I became a professor. But then we opened the center.
вроде бы.
Сейчас уже себя
Do you feel yourself American?
Да, наверное.
Yes, I guess I got used to everything here. My children were born here. They consider Oregon as their homeland.
Такой.
The scientist keeps in touch with his native land. The doctor goes to Almaty often and is happy to go to meetings and conferences.
А с Казахстаном какая-то связь?
I have relatives. My spouse is from Kazakhstan. We often go there, of course, with new technologies.
Конечно, сейчас-то век там, да,
We are on Skype every day, and so on.
каждый день там на связи.
In our century, it seems like everything is invented, everything's open. In reality, there's still a lot of undisclosed things. Moreover, we, as consumers of the result of giant research, most often do not even guess how much time, money, and effort was spent on them. Biology in general, medicine is developing much more slowly, but this is because we do not have the knowledge. That is, we know biology ourselves much less than the surrounding nature, especially at the molecular level. Only recently we sequenced our genome, the most important part of all living things, and literally it was less than 10 years ago, so we didn't even know that we are the essence of living things, what it consists of and what it encodes.
По вашему мнению, в каком направлении будет развиваться биология?
And in your opinion, in what direction will biology develop in the next decade? Of course, we will learn more, but most likely all our knowledge, the basics of biology, can be used for the benefit of healthcare, of course, to cure diseases that we cannot yet. Do not step there. Then, of course, knowledge of biology will most likely allow us to preserve nature as it is today, because human influence certainly aggravates, especially the disappearance of species, and therefore, even here we use cloning, not so much for some kind of treatment, but in order to recreate kinds that were lost with the time. You know, there are projects looking for mammoth cells to reproduce them. I do not know whether it will succeed or not. But in any case, there are species that are now disappearing, and we know that most likely they will disappear. We can now freeze the cells and possibly eggs and be able to recreate in the future.
Что бы вы сказали человеку, который стоит вот на перепутье и думает посвятить свою жизнь науке?
What would you say to a person who thinks of devoting his life to science? Yes, well, in general, science may not be the easiest thing to do, but I think it is very interesting. As I told you, you will never get bored. As it should be interesting for young people to do something new every day. Well, of course, making discovery is always more interesting. Will remain forever. Somebody invented something first 10 years ago, 20, 100 years ago. It all remains in history. The destiny of that amazing person could be different.
А если бы вот вы все-таки не
And if you did not choose the science, who would you have become? I don't know. I studied at the Agricultural Institute at the academy. I mean, I was supposed to be a zoo engineer. I would probably be in charge of some kind of rural enterprise.
А каким вы себя представляете лет, например, я не знаю, через 2?
How do you imagine yourself in about 20 years? In 20 years, I will probably retire, and well, I'm trying to do a lot because now we have built so much. We have so many resources, many things in a project that I couldn't dream of 10 years ago. Therefore, I want more and more. I still remember a warm meeting in a warm October in Portland, and you can't say for sure why. It's the town which is nice and pleasant, or nice and interesting people that we met here, or maybe the successful combination of everything.
Ну давайте тогда в завершении нашей беседы пару слов.
Well then, let's finish our conversation with a few words to Kazakhstan residents. Yes, hello to the people of Kazakhstan. I always think about you, and I always miss my homeland, and try to come more often. Thank you for your attention. That was Pride, and we're continuing our journey. All the best. Goodbye.
Дальше. Всего доброго.
До свидания.